Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to get some great information from Metametrics around the Lexile and Quantile frameworks in your reporting this year. My name is Julie DeBona. I'm your Portfolio Manager with Measure Progress, and I'm just going to start off with some housekeeping tips. As you joined today, you were muted upon entry, so I'll ask you to keep it muted so that we can hear the presentation. If you do have questions as you go along, we will take those at the end of the presentation. And the way to share those questions is in the chat box in your WebEx. So you can type those right into the chat screen. Please make sure that those are addressed to everyone so we can see those questions, and we'll address those at the end of the call. So to get things started today, I'm going to turn it over to Craig Walker, the Executive Director of Assessment, and he will go ahead and introduce the presentation. So Craig.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to kick this off by saying that you currently have access to the LexileQuantile metrics in the OSTP portal, and this information will also be present in the student parent reports, which you will be receiving the paper copies the week after Thanksgiving. So be expecting those paper copies to come in. I will say that this will provide you guys with a more granular information and help provide students with some instructional resources and tools. So if you have any questions, feel free to email assessments@sde.ok.gov, and we'll do our best to answer you in a timely manner. And at this time, I will hand it over to Amber, who is going to kick off the presentation for the Lexiles and Quantiles.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you all for listening today and spending your Friday afternoon with me. My name is Amber Aguirre, and it's a pleasure to share information with you today about Lexile and Quantile reporting through the OSTP, ELA, and math assessments. In our session today, we're going to talk about the research study that was conducted to establish the relationship between the OSTP, ELA, and math assessments and the Lexile and Quantile frameworks. We'll then move on to talk about your performance standards and how to think about those in relation to Lexile and Quantile measures. Next, we'll discuss the Growth Planner and how you can use that tool to look ahead towards being college and career ready. Finally, I'll share a brief overview of the free Lexile and Quantile resources that are available to you. And as Julie mentioned, we'll answer any questions you have at the end of the presentation. I am joined today with two of my colleagues from R&D who are happy to step in if you have any more technical questions that need to be addressed. They are Ellie Sanford-Moore, our Senior VP, and Heather Coons, Director of Research Services. We're going to start today with a brief overview of the research study conducted last spring to enable Lexile Quantile reporting through the OSTP, ELA, and math assessments. The type of study is what we call a linking study, the goal of which is to establish a relationship between two separate scales. Last spring, Metametrics partnered with Measure Progress and the department to conduct two linking studies. The goal was to establish a relationship between the scale scores of the OSTP ELA assessment with the Lexile scale, as well as the scale scores of the OSTP math assessment and the Quantile scale. While the goal of the study was to establish a relationship between scales, the purpose was really to bring new instructional connections to students' OSTP, ELA, and math results. So here's the short version of the linking studies. Metametrics identified Lexile and Quantile items that were appropriate to incorporate into the OSTP, ELA, and math assessments spring administration. So last spring, students saw these items. This means that all students who took these assessments last spring were part of our sample. After the spring administration window, we received student performance data on the Lexile and Quantile items, as well as the OSTP, ELA, and math items. We delved deep into this performance data and succeeded in establishing a statistical relationship to connect the OSTP, ELA, and math student performance with the Lexile and Quantile frameworks. I'd like us to think back to that image of temperature reported in both Fahrenheit and Celsius. So this fall, students' reading ability can be reported as OSTP, ELA scale scores and Lexile measures, And likewise, student math ability can be reported as OSTP math scale scores and quantile measures. Let's transition now to a short discussion about performance standards. And as many of you likely already know, the OSTP performance standards were established through standard setting by Oklahoma stakeholders. Proficient in Oklahoma is defined as students demonstrate mastery over challenging grade level subject matter and that they are on track to be college and career ready. The performance standards reflect the expectations for students learning the Oklahoma academic content standards. So everything is very specific to Oklahoma and Oklahoma's assessment. Which brings me to the next two slides, which come from a document that we distribute that helps communicate the difference between a measurement scale and the labels that often get attached to those scales by various stakeholders. The first example highlights that often the same temperature yields different judgments on comfort. I can relate firsthand as I live and work in North Carolina while my extended family is in Montana. Every summer we visit and we always pack sweatshirts and pants for those brisk 65-degree mornings. My nieces, however, get ready for the day in sundresses. The second example illustrates the same idea but with speed. So here you have two states with the same label speed limit but defined with different maximum speeds. So consequently, what's considered speeding varies by state. And my final example relates to theme parks. And when a child at a theme park asks, can I go on this ride? The answer is, if you're tall enough. But what does tall enough mean? This is a standard describing how tall you must be to go on the ride. So in order to answer the question, we need to know which theme park the child's in. Tall enough means different things in different theme parks. The sign for the Space Mountain ride at Walt Disney World says you must be 44 inches to ride, while the sign for the Space Mountain ride at Disneyland says you must be 40 inches tall to ride. So I hope you can see the bridge I'm trying to make to assessment. So when we talk about labels, such as proficient or college and career ready with parents, it's helpful to remind them that the labels are made by various stakeholders and are tied to a particular assessment. While proficient standards may vary, the Lexile and Quantile scales do not change. The takeaway here is that all the instructional connections that we'll discuss later in the presentation are not impacted by the labels that have been associated to the scales. In this slide, you can see the scale scores associated to grade 3 proficient in Oklahoma, the Lexile and Quantile measures associated with those scale scores, and finally, the Metametrics Lexile and Quantile text and math lesson ranges for grade 3. You can see in Oklahoma you have a high proficient standard, which aligns back to that definition that students demonstrate mastery over challenging grade level subject matter and that they are on track to be college and career ready. Another thing that people use to interpret the Lexile measures are our grade ranges. Metametrics has published grade ranges on our website that are associated with students, as well as ranges that are associated with materials. When you use the student ranges or communicate them, please keep in mind that these ranges provide information for descriptive purposes and offer a norm perspective. The goal is to give you a sense of how a student's Lexile or Quantile measure, their reading or math ability, compares to Lexile and Quantile measures for students in the same grade. The ranges are not intended to be a guide or standard that students are expected to reach. There are also grade ranges associated with materials, specifically text and the difficulty of math lessons. These ranges are intended to serve as a guide to the difficulty level of materials students should be able to engage with to be on track to be college and career ready. The Lexile text ranges represent the demand of text that students should be reading to be college and career ready, while the Quantile math lesson ranges represent the difficulty level of math skills that students encounter on their way to college and career readiness. Here you have the links to more information about our grade ranges, as well as the tables for students and the tables for text and math lessons by grade. There's a lot of information, too, to help you interpret them, so please take a look at that. Now we can transition a little bit from interpreting the reporting of Lexile and Quantile measures to how they are a valuable indicator of student growth over time. Powered by research into specific text and mathematical demands of individual occupations and post-secondary study, the Growth Planner allows students, parents, and educators to monitor progress towards goals, but also adjust instruction to close any learning gaps that may exist. With the Growth Planner, you can chart a child's growth, forecast future growth, compare that forecasted growth with the reading and mathematical demands of college and careers, and if needed, identify a custom growth path to ensure the child graduates college and career ready. The Growth Planner creates charts like this one based on a student's Lexile or Quantile measure. So let's unpack this graph just a little bit. The yellow boxes are the reading and mathematical demands students encounter at each grade. So if you're looking at the Lexile Growth Planner, they reflect the reading demands at each grade, and obviously if you're looking at the Quantile Growth Planner, you're looking at the mathematical demands at each grade. These ranges describe the difficulty level of the materials students typically interact with at each grade. These are the same ranges that you can find on our website. The dot is the student's Lexile or Quantile measure, so that would reflect perhaps the measure they received this year from the OSTP, ELA, and math assessment. The dotted line is the student's estimated performance in future years based on this student's current test score and how well students at this level typically grow. So just like any kind of tool where you can kind of forecast into the future, I use one for my retirement plan, this tool can help gauge how prepared that student is for college and career, which is that goal or the yellow, dark yellow target at the top right corner above grade 12, that shaded area. Finally, the green line is a recommended growth path that can lead to college and career readiness by the end of 12th grade. So if the student is falling a little short, we also offer a path to get within the range that is useful for parents and educators to see, how much they need to grow or what they might need to do instructionally to help get that child onto that growth path. Another line of research relevant to the idea of college and career readiness is Metametric's career preparedness work. Instead of the general goals for college and career readiness for all students, you can also use Metametric's specific reading and mathematical demands of more than 250 high-interest, high-demand occupations. So as we see here, we know that if an individual student is interested in a career as an electrician, that student needs a reading skill of about 1,270 Lexile and a mathematical skill of 1045 Quantile in order to enter that profession. With this research, we can help individual students better imagine the finish line for their own learning based on their own unique goals. So how did we determine the specific career ranges? Well, our team identified, measured, and analyzed the materials that are used by individuals who are being trained for or are in their first year of employment in these careers. So here's an example of a student who is specifically interested in being a video game designer. Rather than the general college and career target, which is the shaded yellow box at the top right, you see the specific range needed for a video game designer. So if you have a student in the OSTP program that's a third grader this year, moving forward, you'll be able to plot their results in 4th grade, 5th grade, and so on, and keep seeing how they're moving towards their own target or the general college and career target. Here are the links to the growth planners, and I hope that you're ready to try them out and to use them. The only thing you need to do is to put in the student's Lexile measure and the date of the assessment and their grade. It's a very easy tool to use, And you can also, if you wanted to look specifically at a career, there's a drop-down box that lists the various careers from statistician to video game designer to electrician, you name it, there's a bunch in there. You'll be able to see a specific range of materials for that profession, or I should say that career. Many of you are familiar with the Lexile framework, but this might be the first time you've come across the Quantile framework. So we'll have a look quickly at the connections the Quantile measures offer to support day-to-day learning. Quantile measures are useful for the classroom. Teachers can use them to sequence materials. When they see the difficulty of the mathematical skills, they can sequence those throughout the year. When they understand the difficulty level of a lesson, a particular lesson, they can go back and look at what pre-teaching might be needed or reteach some skills that are needed to understand that lesson. And of course, they can locate additional resources for remedial and enrichment activities. At home, parents can use Quantile measures to locate additional instructional materials, both within and below a child's Quantile range, to help ensure positive and motivating experiences. Parents can celebrate a child's math accomplishments because the Quantile framework provides a way to track and monitor growth. It's also a useful way to communicate with a child's teacher. On Quantiles.com, you can find these resources and a wealth of information, really. So I'd like to share these with you at a very high level. If there's any questions or if you'd like me to delve deeper into them, please share that with Julie, and if there's time, we'll look at them a little bit more closely. The first one is really a guide. It's an overview where you can find step-by-step instructions for using our three most popular tools for the Quantile framework, which are Find Your Textbook, Math Skills Database, and the Quantile Teacher Assistant. So if you just want to kind of peruse a little bit about these, that would be a good place to start. The Find Your Textbook search tool identifies the difficulty level of each lesson in a textbook measured on the Quantile scale, and also shows you key concepts, knowledge clusters, or prerequisites and impending skills surrounding the lesson. So you can go to this tool, you can look up your textbook, and it will give you the ways that you can align the measures of the lessons with student Quantile measures to differentiate and motivate student learning. You can also find additional resources to help reinforce and maintain those newly learned student skills. The Math Skills Database helps educators locate resources aligned to Quantile skills and concepts, as well as your state's mathematical standards. So you can select activities and resources to provide an additional instructional support when material is challenging, or to stimulate additional learning when a topic holds high interest for the student and enrichment activities are needed. The Quantile Teacher Assistant helps teachers plan lessons that differentiate instruction so lessons meet the varied math abilities and learning needs of the classroom. When you search for the state standard you want to teach, the Quantile Teacher Assistant will show you additional math skills and concepts that are prerequisite concepts that students must understand in order to progress in their study of mathematics, as well as supplemental concepts for students who have the ability to move forward. Finally, Math at Home is a free website full of tools and family-friendly activities to support your child's mathematics learning. With Math at Home, you can work with your child to practice specific mathematical skills and concepts at the right level of difficulty. In just a few simple steps, you can build a customized list of materials and activities that match your child's unique ability level and learning goals. You can also work with your child's teacher to provide a list of targeted activities to practice outside of school. And just not to leave out the Lexile side of things, here's a reminder of where you can find our most popular tools, which include the overview video, the Lexile map, which many of you might have seen. Find a Book is our tool for searching for a title and finding the Lexile measure of a book. You can also build reading lists with that tool. For Lexile Analyzer and online databases of articles used in Oklahoma schools, there's links there too. Again, if you need more information on those resources, I'm happy to dive into those. So I'd like to take some questions now. There was a lot to kind of process in this study with in this presentation with the linking study and with the standards and the grade ranges and our tools. Again, I wanted to leave plenty of opportunity for questions given the rollout of this after Thanksgiving, and I'm available to take those now. Julie Shaw.
Hi, everyone. I just want to let everybody know, first of all, that the PowerPoint and the recording from today will be posted to the Help and Support page sometime next week. So, Amber, we have a question. How accurate is the Lexile Analyzer?
The Lexile Analyzer available online is restricted to sampling. So it is, I'm not sure I can explain that as well as when we look at a whole book. Ellie, is this one that you want to talk about?
Just make sure. Hello?
Hi, Ellie. Go ahead.
Okay. With the question with the Lexile Analyzer, as Amber was mentioning, what's on our website is based on samples and everything. When we measure a whole book, so that is more accurate and everything. But we usually talk about how accurate are Lexile text measures specifically with a margin of error of about 64 Lexiles. But again, it will depend on the length of the piece of text. So it's always, we always think of it as an estimate, but it's a very good estimate.
Amber, I have a question from Barbara. We know what student quantile scores were after April testing, but how would we find their current quantile scores?
Well, I think you can think of those as their current quantile measure as best as we know from the state assessment. But again, there has been instruction this fall, so you can assume there has been some growth this fall. And every time students are administered a new assessment that reports quantile measures, we get a better estimate of their abilities. So there's no way for me to tell you, you know, how much their quantile measure has changed since last spring's assessment, but I can tell you that it was a very, you know, we have a good gauge that that's probably where they started the beginning of this year. Ellie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. I think I'm there. As Amber said, if they had taken another assessment this fall, that could answer that more specifically. You could use the OSTP results as a guide to where to begin, and then use other assessments to inform that. So it could be some interim assessments or something. But also, too, we can think about what is typical growth for a student over a school year and maybe approximate that. So there are various things that could be done. I'm going to go ahead and answer the next question, and that's about, is there a quantile analyzer? We have online, as Amber was talking about, was the Lexile Analyzer, where you can measure a piece of text and get a range for that text complexity estimate. We don't have that on the Quantile side. Those materials are measured here at Metametrics at this time. We're in the process of working on developing one, but it's not available yet.
So Jack wants to know, what would be the quantile score that equals proficient and what quantile score?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What would be the quantile score that equals proficient and what quantile score?
This is Ellie again. Either way. That's going to vary by grade level. So if he's talking about a specific grade level, Amber, you thinking what I was thinking, going back to this specific slide. And you'll see that's the quantile range associated with proficient in grade 3. If you're talking about college and career readiness and where an individual should be, that's from about 1220 quantiles to 1440 quantiles.
Amber, Craig wants to know, would it be possible to showcase a quantile page and walk folks through the tools?
Yes. So Craig, are you thinking about what you saw the other day? Perhaps what we can do is go to the specific tools. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Are we still?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the Find Your Textbook tool. And as you can see, you search for your textbook by title, ISBN, the publisher, the state edition or course. Ellie, is there a specific title that you can think of that I should put in?
I think you can put big ideas.
Okay, let's see what comes up. Wow, look there's a lot of big ideas. So if we just hold up one of these, it will show you the quantile measure of each lesson. And that's really where the utility comes into teachers who are using these textbooks. So as you go back to your schools and look in your classrooms and you pull up your textbook that you're using with your students, it really helps you prepare to see, your students' measures in relation to the specific lesson that you might be teaching that day. And then if you click Show Related Quantile Skills and Concepts, you can see other ones that are related to them. Are there any questions about the textbook utility?
There are none in the chat box yet, but I do have another question. What quantile score equals readiness for Algebra 1? His principal said it used to be 1,090.
This is Ellie. From most of the research we've done, it's around 1030 quantiles to have those prerequisite skills that you would need for Algebra 1.
Is there another question?
I don't see any more, but we're going to stay on the line for a few more minutes to give people a chance to think everything through. If they have any further questions, they can ask.
Sure. So while we're thinking of questions, I'm going to share the MaxGo database. This is the database where you can search for your standards. So if we look at the standards in Oklahoma, and perhaps pick grade 3 and search for them, here you can see the quantile measure that's associated with the skill and concept that we've identified aligns with your state's goal academic standards. Ellie, do you want to share more about how teachers use this in relation to their standards?
Yes, if you'll click on one of those, I think this will be good.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go down, it's giving that same information. It's giving some additional information, though, that will help teachers and everything. One is the knowledge cluster, and if you'll click on that for a moment. There, yeah. What that does is shows the prerequisite skills, what skills students should already be able to do. And when I talk about this a lot of times, I think about what if we're doing two-step equations today? What they really need to be able to know how to do is one-step equations. So what are those prerequisites? So I can start thinking about which of my students are ready for this, which may need some little help and support for those prerequisites even. It also shows the supporting skills, which are typically skills that are taught roughly the same time, but support this maybe in a different strand. So if you're doing circle graphs, it might also bring in the area measure of a sector, those angles, and get at that. And then the impending skills are the ones that come next. So compared to this specific quantile skill and concept that we're talking about, or your state standard, what are those prerequisites, what are those impending ones that are coming next, to put it all in context. Then down below that, Amber, if you'll click on the resources, this is where we've identified free resources on the web of where could be related to this specific quantile skill and concept. And you could use them with your state standards. So these are all materials that teachers can just access at any time. Yes, I think that's it. Then it just shows the Oklahoma state standards down there.
A couple more questions. Are the links for the website, such as the math skills database, textbook, utility, etc., posted on the SDE website, or where's the best place to find these for easy access? They are in the PowerPoint here, and that will be posted on the Help and Support site next week, along with this recording. Another question, you may have said this already, but is there a skills database for Lexile levels as well?
This is Ellie, and that's one of the differences between the Lexile and the Quantile. On the reading side, we're looking at reading ability and everything. And so therefore, it's there's not a skills database like there is here, but there are all the resources, all the books and everything that are at different Lexile levels. And generally, what I've seen in the past is that I want to make sure somebody can read it, and then they usually can then be able to work with the skills and everything. So it's kind of a two-step process on the Lexile side.
Craig has updated the chat box. The SD is currently updating their page to reflect the newest information for the Lexile Quantile metrics. as we speak. Any other questions? Go ahead and post them in the chat box, and we'll give you a few more minutes. Oh, here's another one. I'm at a middle school, grades 6 through 8. For a student to be considered proficient, the quantile score would be the same as a CCRA readiness score of about 1220 to 1400, or are there different quantile measures for proficient and CCR?
This is where I think we need to go back what Amber was talking about, and when you define it as proficient, you should be using that range associated with your state assessment. So we had in there what it was for grade 3. We'd have to look up what it is for middle school. If you're talking about just more general college and career readiness at a more general level, those are specific for each grade level, and that 1220 to 1440 is by the time you finish grade 12.
We'll give it a couple more minutes with questions. Are there descriptors about how the text complexity is determined for Lexile levels?
I'm not sure what you're asking about with descriptors. There are descriptions of the process of how text complexity is determined. So I'm not quite sure what's being asked. Amber, do you want to talk about the Quantile Teacher Assistant a little bit?
Sure, yeah, if we're losing steam on questions for a minute, we're going back to Craig's more in-depth look or request to look a little bit more deeply into the tools. And this tool, as you may have watched the screen kind of change, is the Quantile Teacher Assistant. And you put in the state standard that you want to teach. And in this case, it was read and write fractions with words and symbols. And then the Quantile Teacher Assistant shows you the QSCs that are prerequisite concepts. So you can see those to the left. And then you can see the focus one in the middle there, some that support it, so things that the teachers can see there. And then the impending ones are the ones that are coming up. So again, it's kind of putting all the information together for a teacher as she's preparing her lesson.
And you can adjust that slider bar up at the top to best match the students in your class. And as you do that, those ranges may change. Then the colors may change. And then where it says more each place, this is where you can click to get the actual links to the resources that we were talking about earlier. And this one had a lot of resources.
Any other questions?
Let me pull up the map at home quickly for everyone as well. So here is where parents can work with their children to practice specific math skills and concepts at the right level of difficulty. So here's where we can build a customized list of materials and activities that match the child's unique quantile measure. Let's see, does anyone have a good memory of the sufficient? Let's see, I guess I could just say usually performs well. So this is where the question earlier about, you don't know the child's quantile measure because you think he's grown quite a bit since their spring assessment. This is a place where you can get around that by not putting in a specific measure. And here are the resources for parents. So again, we offer web resources, some downloadable ones, and some that are in print as well.
And if you as a parent, if you knew that your child was struggling with homework on a specific topic, you could put in some keywords and kind of limit the number of things that came up. Find pieces of information that were more specific to what they were doing on their homework.
Okay, I think it's been pretty quiet from the questions. Amber, I think we're good. Thank you so much, everybody, for calling in, and thank you, Metametrics.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to share this information with you.
All right, thank you.
Our contact information will be at the end as well if there's any questions that come up after you folks process some of this a little bit more. Craig, did you have any questions for us before we all say goodbye for the afternoon?
Would you mind going through an example growth planner with maybe one of the quantile measures?
Sure, I'd love to.
Great.
I'm going to go back. I'm just clicking back to, oops, that's not the link I'm. Okay, so here's the link will take you to this site, and you know you're at the right place because it says Oklahoma State Department of Education at the top. We'll add our quantile measure. Let's see, Ellie, what would be a good quantile measure for grade 3 spring?
Go 500, I guess.
Okay, 500. Let's say that you took this last spring. And let's say you started and here's your graph. And this is the generic one, right? So if you look at the top right screen where you have the shaded dark yellow box, that's the college and career readiness range, the general one, which is 1220 quantile to 1440 quantile. But again, you can pick the specific career that you're interested in looking if you want to delve down into a more particular target for your student and their interests. So I'm just kind of scrolling a little bit so that you get a sense of the career options here that you could look at.
Amber, I want to point out that it's important to notice that you can add additional measures. So if the schools have an interim or benchmark system or common formative assessments that provide those scales, that additional information can be included in this growth planner.
So let's imagine that perhaps the student grew some this year, and you got a beginning of year assessment on them.
And change the grade.
Oops. Yes, they have gone to a new grade, haven't they? And now you have two measures. You have two dots. And so as you can see moving forward, the wealth of information that you could be putting into these charts. You'll have multiple years of OSTP going forward, and you have all of your local assessments that you're using with your districts and your schools.
Right now, this best works with the OSTP scores, and so that would be the best thing to use those to give you a starting estimate.
I'm off to see my optometrist today, so here you, whoops, let's see. I guess we could see what it might be for accountant, and you see how the range box, the box moves to the right of my screen as you put in different careers. Greg, thank you for asking me to come here. Is there anything else I can pull up for you in your educator?
Amber, I do have another question that just came through. It came to me privately. I'm going to put it in the chat box as it's kind of long, but I will read it as well. Please help me understand why a quantile measure of 1120, which graphs at or above grade level for 8th grade and well on track for college and career readiness, is scoring as limited knowledge on the OK OPI. I know we are discussing quantile and not OK measures, but I will have to help parents understand this difference.
Okay, is the OPI an interim assessment? I'm trying to understand the acronyms here. The Oklahoma OPI?
That's the scale score, the OPI. Yes, that's the Oklahoma OSTP scale score.
So I think this goes back to what Amber was talking about earlier with the difference in the definitions and the descriptors of these different things. And so Oklahoma, on your state assessment, you've set very specific performance standards of what you consider being proficient. These are talking about for just general college and career readiness, not to the level maybe that what Oklahoma has set for their expectations.
Ellie, could you maybe dive in a little bit deeper on that and maybe give some pointers on how they could explain that to a parent so that they would understand that? I know it's a little bit higher level thinking on that part, but I think if we could get some talking points on that, that would be great.
So on the Lexile side, while Ellie kind of supports me on the Quantile side, I like to think of it a little bit as the college and career readiness is really singularly focused on the text demand, so the reading demand of the materials, while your proficiency standards are really looking at what students are able to do in with the state curriculum, with the content standards, and the level of which they must master those grade level standards in addition to being college and career ready. So there's more than just, in that standard, there's more than just being able to read text from your ELA assessment. And so that's why there might be a little bit of a mismatch with the label there and what you're thinking of in relation to another label, which is the college and career ready label. Is that helpful, Craig?
Yes, I think that example does help for ELA. It makes a lot of sense that it's measuring reading ability specifically and not language and research and those other kind of academic standards. But I think math, we might need some concrete examples like that as well.
I think it's very similar on the math side in that you've set expectations of where you want students to be able to, what you expect them to be able to do given your state curricular framework, and how you define mathematics. You know, what skills and concepts do you have at each grade level? And so you've set those based on your curricular framework and where you think students need to be. This is at more of a national level. Kind of think of it that way, the difference between something more local, state-specific, versus more of a general national level.
I do have one more question. So for an entering 9th grade student, what previous scores should we be considering to look at a student's growth?
For a 9th grade student. I think, you know, in a lot of ways with what you've got now with your OSTP assessment and everything, that's where you're starting from. So their assessment from this past spring, which you're getting the results, you've just gotten the results from.
That's all that's in the queue for questions. Okay, I think we're all set here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Metametrics.
Thank you for having us.